Now it's my pleasure to introduce a little armchair discussion between Michael, and Scott Siddell from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and Pat is from the Women's Media Center, and they're going to be talking about some intergenerational commitments, and looking forward to hearing what Sally has to say. She's going to be moderating, so over to Sally.
While we're getting mic'd, you were all in here for The Wolf, right? Okay, so I want to read you something. Advice from a wolf. Trust your instincts. Keep your den clean. Stand for what you believe. Howl with your friends. Pack life with good memories. It's a refrigerator sticker.
Perfect.
I thought that was great.
Yeah. Where were they? We missed it, you know.
They were here.
Right out there?
Right here. And right here.
Oh, in the room?
Yes.
Oh.
Really sorry that flight was delayed.
Yes. Yes, it was really wonderful. Well, I again am so delighted to be here. I've been friends with the Seidells for
Don't say.
a long time. And the Turners, they're all mixed in together. And today I'm so delighted to have both Pat and Scott here. They've been a wife and husband team for quite a while in all the things that we care about. Pat has focused on women and media. She's on the board of the Women's Media Center, and also she is, are you still chair of Sundance? Mm-hmm. She's chair of the Sundance Film Festival. Scott has spent a great many years looking at toxins, particularly in textiles. You heard about his expertise in plastics and waste. He's also on the board of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and working on circular economies. So one of the things, or two of the things we're going to talk about is what each of them are doing right now, but also the intergenerational commitment of this family to environment and to a better planet is absolutely extraordinary. And we're going to talk about that a little bit because Rutherford Seidel was here and gave the presentation on the Oxygen Project the first morning, if you weren't here, right after Sylvia. And he is the son of Scott, and this is his stepmother. And Rutherford's daughter, their granddaughter, and Ted Turner's granddaughter, Vassar Seidel, you might remember, she was on one of the youth panels this morning. She was also a host on Monday night. So, and all the grandkids that are at an age where they can choose what they're going to do are going in this direction. It's really quite remarkable. So, I'm going to ask you first, Pat. With all of your travels all over the world, you were in Africa recently with Laura and with Vassar. So 3 generations. And you were there looking at ecotourism, wildlife, problems with species and habitat. Tell us a little bit about that.
It was a wonderful opportunity to be a part of an intergenerational conversation. And as you were talking, Sally, and I was feeling that pride that we all feel as grandparents and parents, and knowing that our children and grandchildren were here on the stage as they are, any opportunity they get to talk about the planet and how we conserve natural resources. And I was thinking how lucky I am because I'm married into environmental consciousness. And I was also hired into it because, as you know, it was Ted Turner, whose production company I got to run. I had the privilege of running for many years, and he really brought me in full force into the difference that media could make in terms of social change. So that understanding has propelled not only the work I've done, but it propels our family to look at ways that we can walk the talk, that we can live in ways that show environmental consciousness is a way of living, being aware of everything we do, and this is a room that is so aware of it, we don't need to go into details. But there are many people who aren't. So one of the things that, again, a great privilege of mine is I serve on a travel company board that is totally focused on conservation travel or empowerment of women travel. We do only those two kinds of trips. And we had the opportunity to convene in Kenya and look at the extraordinary threat to the species in that country and throughout Africa, as well as looking at what we as citizens and consumers and mothers and fathers and grandparents do every day. So we brought a group of people together, and I got to invite my daughter-in-law, the exceptional environmental leader, Laura Turner Seidel, to come. And then she said to me, well, you know, Vassar is on this gap year. She may have talked about that here. And one of the things we promised her is that I would take her on every conference and forum that I'm doing this year.
Oh my goodness.
And honestly, she says it's been the greatest education, but for me, it has been the greatest thrill of my life so far. I have to say, to travel the world with your granddaughter and see everything through her eyes and perspective, I'm gonna cry. Sorry. It makes me very emotional to think how lucky I am to be able to do that. And so she said, I'll come along and I'll bring that millennial point of view to this conversation. So we had the opportunity for 6 days at a beautiful retreat that is completely off the grid and 100% conservation centered, to talk every day with all generations who were there, people of all ages from all parts of the world. And I think that Laura and Vassar's conversation together about how the challenges that come sometime when you are challenged on what you believe is right, and do you make that compromise? Do you say, well, I'll accept the plastic straw this time? Never. Down to the bigger issues of advocacy, choosing your fights, deciding what groups to support, what organizations to be a part of. So I get a lot of lessons by living with this man who is the truest, totally to the core environmentalist and conservationist I've ever known. So
You mean when I'm sorting the garbage, is that?
yeah, yeah. And coming back to me with pieces of it going, when are you going to learn? This does not go here, it goes here.
Come on, I never did.
No, I get these lessons every day, believe me. And so does everyone in our lives, because it is a part of putting it into practice and showing you can have a full and rich and satisfying and rewarding life, all the more worthwhile.
Exactly.
Because you're doing the right thing
Yeah.
for the earth.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Scott, you have been looking at toxic issues for 2 or 3 decades at least. And
At least.
at least. and most recently, you are now on the board of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation,
Right, yeah.
and she is one of the leaders and really got circular economy into the lexicon. And so tell us, you were just telling me earlier that you came back from their big meeting, and
Right.
you said it was so incredible. Would you share with us what
think
went
the-
on? And
Because time is short, I'll just give you sort of a
Sure.
summary of what's going on. And I don't normally speak because obviously I have a speaker in the family and 2 or 3 youngsters. So forgive me if I'm just kind of stumbling over this a little bit because I probably didn't prepare too well. But as most of you may know, Ellen MacArthur's the young lady that sailed around the world in a catamaran and beat all the men. So that appeals to Pat. And when she started her foundation to try to rid the ocean of some of the trash and plastics that she has seen out there, she decided that the best way to get through to business people was to go where they are going to be and speak to them directly. And she thought the best way to do that in a language that they can understand is use their consultancy. So she's got McKinsey writing her reports, and I invite you to go on her website and pull down the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's reports on plastics and other trash right on up to food waste, because they are very, very comprehensive, and they're aimed at a level that business people can understand. They can really see those and understand them. And they make those presentations annually in January, at the end of January, at the World Economic Forum. So they're speaking to 500 multinational business people, along with the politicians that they own, and along with the influential people and nonprofits that kind of help them along the way toward sustainability. And when I first saw that concept, I got on an airplane and went to London to meet these people, because I had chaired a number of organizations in the United States where I had been trying my best to see if we can't capture some of the toxicity that is roaming through our bodies, divert it in another direction. And I think what I was hearing when I walked in today, and what I've heard so much talk about before recently, has been plastics. And I think that's what we really need to address. Somebody asked about bioplastics. There are 5 projects right now that I know of that have substance to them that are going on to work on plastics, and they're being supported by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. They gave away $2 million last year. A good bit of it went to young people and universities that are working on alternative plastics that are biodegradable in marine atmosphere. And one of those that's exciting to me is polyhydroxyalkanates, or what you'll hear PHA, because not only is it biodegradable in marine water, but the sun accelerates it and it floats. So you can kind of get the idea that it will go away quickly and reverts into sort of like fish food. So that's the summary of where some of that's going today. Please do look at the reports of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, because the latest one is on food waste and how to capture it and use it for beneficial purposes other than igniting the gases.
So let me ask you another question. Tell us a little bit about the concept and the reality of a circular economy. We run into some problems with some of the organizations that I helped found, like the Sustainable Packaging Coalition, which is part of the Green Blue Institute, started by William McDonough, and I chaired that one for 10 years. But basically, what their concentration and their focus has been more on trying to see if materials can't be picked up from current use and used in other uses. And I think that sometimes the source industries try to influence that, just as lobbyists in Washington will try to work for different companies. What we want to see when we talk about a circular economy is, hey, buddy, if you're going to make that product, it's going to be yours until you do something else with it. And what we would like to see you do is make it back into the same product again. And if the answer to that is you can't make it into the same product again, then stop making the product and stop making the packaging. So that's basically what the circular economy is about. So in Denmark, there's a story that there's a couple companies that produced a lot of packaging and a lot of waste, and a grassroots group decided, well, okay, if we cannot convince them to do otherwise, everybody that buys their product, take the waste back, the packaging back, and put it in front of their shop door.
Oh, that's a good idea.
And they did. And you probably know about this. And yeah. And there are photographs of mountains of trash in front of this storefront. And lo and behold, they did shift. They got the message. So somebody earlier today was saying, you know, if the consumer really gets involved, if the consumer says, I'm not buying it, forget it, you know, it will make a big difference. The old term is boycott. You remember tuna, you know, the boycott on tuna 30 years ago, which made some difference. But consumers in this country aren't really organized in a way, mobilized in a way that they are a political force. And that's a big gap. That's one thing we haven't talked about. talked about here. So that's just a comment.
We
to
had
follow
Paul
up.
Hawken here earlier. Didn't he talk about blessed unrest?
He was not here.
Oh, he wasn't?
He
Bless
was-
his heart.
No,
Yeah.
the
I
last
saw he
meeting
was going to be coming here.
But Sally, you know,
Go ahead.
you make such a good point, and the reason I think Ellen MacArthur's been, and her foundation has been more successful is that they go to the CEOs, they go right straight to the top, and they say, there are a lot of actions we could take. But what we're going to do instead is help you figure this out. And that's why they bring chemists like Scott and other people on the board, so that the company says, we don't know how to make this product reusable. They give them 50 ways that you can do it. And you have said often they give them enough timeline too, that, you know,
They can transition.
They can transition without stockholders going crazy or
Right.
being able to use that as an excuse anyway. But the companies that have signed up to do just what Scott described is remarkable.
It's remarkable.
And that is, of course, how the change is going to come about.
Exactly. We had Mindy Luber here from Series.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And we were
Series.
talking about, how you move the capital markets into drawdown.
Yeah.
The top 10, top 12, the drawdown strategies like refrigeration, number
Right.
one, that nobody
Yeah.
really knew anything about that. And we did have some speakers talking about refrigeration. But without that kind of information, most people don't know, what those strategies are, and the capital markets don't know either. And if it doesn't make economic sense, they're not going to do that. So you really have to make the economic case.
Right. So you've got this group that's, been following you now for over a decade with Arde, huh?
Yeah.
So we need to get them all organized and get them to act up a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, I really thought Greenpeace had a stroke of genius, because Hearst was the old chemical company. It was one of the largest ones in the world, and they were just spewing out all this stuff. And so what they did, they had 4,000 employees outside of Frankfurt, and Greenpeace just went over with some Caterpillar D9s and dug up their driveway in the morning. And
That'll do it.
I thought it got the point across, And of course, the chemical company said that created a lot of hazards. Something could have gone wrong. I mean, these are the people that were making gas for the Germans,
Right.
during World War II. So,
Right.
yeah, why are they still around? Why are these bad people still around? We just need to get organized and go after them. So
You can tell
was-
that the older we get, the more dangerous we become.
Yeah.
I just want you to know that.
Exactly.
There's no question about it.
Well, we've already won the game. We've outlived life
That's right.
expectancy.
As I like to say, we have a lot less to lose, we have nothing to prove, and we are really damned impatient. So, let's get on with this,
I'm ready. Let's go. Anyway, the first time I saw her, you're talking about people that have been in the battle for a long time. You were kissing Gorbachev. I mean, you and he have worked. You and he have
It might
started.
have been more appropriate to say I was leading his environmental organization.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
you were
Yeah.
chairing his
Global Green.
organization. Yeah.
But
Global
that's
Green.
a good,
Global
on
Green, yeah.
behalf of Ted Turner. I did get the exceptional opportunity, but it's interesting when you look at Global Green and so many of the other organizations that have been there for a long time, and the focus had to be on let's start the rescue effort. That was the
Yeah.
focus of Global Green. Let's rescue the Earth from the environmental damage that's already there. Now we're at another place. We got to do more than rescue and reuse, and we've got to move it to a completely new cycle. And I am personally so impressed and inspired by Ellen MacArthur, who was an 18-year-old woman whose life was sailing, who came out of that and who said, I don't care what it takes and who I have to convince, but I am not going to have the world and the oceans look like what I just experienced in this round-the-world trip. And she did it as a
She did.
millennial, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good to remember when we think about the power of generations. I'm inspired by that fact.
I am too.
She has put this together and then had the sense to bring on elders, if I might call you that, darling.
Very seldom that a couple that gets along so well has a guy involved that really is in love with another woman. I mean, and she is definitely on the list, there's no question about it. And so are you too, by the way, my dear. I really love what you do.
So we've been talking a lot about how we flip the paradigm because in the last few days, because we are running out of time. And this is why the intergenerational commitment and the training and the example, and you and Vassar going to all these meetings, and so many people in the Turner and the Seidel family, you know, out there walking the talk. And this is also what gives me hope. Because when you hear Vassar talk, you know, she's there. She nailed it today on, you know, she nailed it.
And you know, we don't even realize what they're absorbing. And we recently had two 13-year-old grandchildren with us in Africa. And again, we didn't really know how they would see the world and what the images and lessons they would bring home. We've seen a complete change in the way they talk about everything, the way they stop people and say, did you know, and don't do that. I mean, they've become activists. And that is really what we need, are generations of activists. And we hope we're bringing that into the world. You mentioned drawdown. Can I just say one thing that this has probably been said, but to me, one of the most important takeaways from that book is that isn't it the top 5? I think it's the top 5 things you can do to reduce your carbon footprint and to start to impact the drawdown are exactly related to the millennial sustainable goal of empowering women and girls. They are connected.
Yes, they are connected. 5 and 6.
That's right, 5 and 6.
5 and 6 have to do with educating women and girls and empowering women. And when you combine those two, and this is over a 20-year period, each one is targeted at reducing annually 80 gigatons of emissions. If you add them together, that's number one.
Number one. Right.
Yeah, and so of course there's a timeline there, but it is so important, and you have been deeply involved in empowering women and all over the world.
Well, Sally, so have you. The fact that you and Osprey have created this global women's group who are really featuring the environmental work that's being done so significantly and making such a big difference in many of the countries where the news of what they're doing does not come to us. So one of the things that I try and do in my work is exactly that, just give those women who are doing that work day in and day out a platform for telling their stories, for sharing their ideas, and if I can do that, that's one small way of further empowering them. But what I find in nearly every community, no matter where it is, women are at the center of the work that is creating the greatest, fastest, most sustainable change, because they have to do it day in and day out for their families and communities.
Yeah, that's exactly.
And if you watch this last conversation that's been going on about immigration, I think it's time for women to control politics. Because if you...
No question.
No argument here.
Women talking like mothers.
And I have to just put in another word for Ted Turner, as well as my husband, who is the best feminist I know. But Ted said 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, you may remember, on the floor of the United Nations, it is time for men never to run for public office for the next 100 years to get rid of testosterone poisoning. Now, a lot of people wouldn't go that far. Ted always goes further than most would. But the idea now that is proving out in this new UN report that the lack of corruption, the prioritizing and budgets for education and health services,
and
all of those things come about when there is a majority of women's leadership in Parliament, Congress, and in business.
In decision making, and also out of that comes better environmental policy as well.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
So I think
Can I sum up?
I think your time is over, actually.
I just wanted to say one thing, because before we all go, guys, it's almost over. Sip your tea carefully. You know, I don't know whether any of y'all have sat up here or not, but this looks like the sun coming up in your face, and this one's counting down over here, and this one are the last slides we saw before we came up here. So if I sounded a little bit confused, it's because I don't do this very often, but there's one thing I learned in the South, and that is listening to Baptist preachers, and that is I'm not leaving here without an altar call. My email address is Scott, S-C-O-T-T, @Seydel, S-E-Y-D-E-L. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation is looking for ideas, and if you have one that is a good idea that will help us get plastics out of this universe, please pass it along to me, and I promise you, they listen to me at those board meetings, so I'll take it along. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally.
Yes, thank you.
Before we let you go here, we decided that we had never honored a husband and wife team before with a joint award, so you all are now going to be subject to the R Day, well, and there's even little white gloves and everything.
Oh, look at that.
And this is the Lifetime Achievement Award. So, you know, but this is a shared award for both of you all.
Oh,
And
isn't
Sally,
that
I'm gonna
nice? That is so sweet of you. That is really great. Thank you.
They deserve it. We're talking decades of dedication and commitment.
That is terrific. I've never gotten one before. She has a whole room full of.
Well, her name's on there too. We don't want to avoid any fights or anything.